more work into your intro.
What is it? I saw your update one.
We're already
Is
live.
that...
Guess we can't have that conversation anymore.
Sure you can. You can fix everything in post.
Let's do one line.
Yeah, that's how much I care about my intro. I don't know why we do it every week, so...
Thanks for contributing, Marty.
Where's my headset?
The main reason I'm here is so that I can save myself the time of listening to this later.
That's a very good reason. I listened to the last episode on my drive home from Andrew's course on the weekend. It's pretty good. It's a good show.
It was fun last week, yeah.
I enjoyed it last week. It kind of got off the rails a little bit, but that's okay.
It's like our thing.
Anyway, let's do this. Hello to all of our listeners out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 33 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, recorded on July 11th, 2016. Joining me this evening, we have Tyler. Tyler's an IRL troll, and a semi-pro Jimmy. I'm just
blowing it. You got to fix it in editing. Just say it clean. Start over again.
This is why you have to keep your intro nice and simple.
Tyler is an IRL troll and semi-pro Jimmy wrestler. He's been shooting since he was 18, and he can be found competing with the non-state active shooting team across Ontario, or co-hosting the International Liberty or Death podcast. Hey, Tyler, how's it going?
Going well.
Right on. We also have Marty. Marty's a sport shooter and sunter. We also have Marty.
Beer, Andrew.
I'll fuck you all up.
Yeah, good to be here, Andrew.
I swear to God. We also have Marty. Marty's a sport shooter and hunter from Southern Ontario. Hi, Marty.
How's it going?
Good, thanks. As always, I'm your host, Andrew. I'm a libertarian competitive shooter, gear reviewer at everydaytactical.com, and a firearms instructor. I once tried to count the number of licks to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Gavin's not here this evening, so I'll read the show copy, I guess. We'd love to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email us at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. If you'd like to leave us a review on iTunes, if you leave a 5-star review, you're able to choose an alcoholic beverage for Gavin to imbibe. The edited version of our show is available on Stitcher, I guess, because people gave us feedback about how they love Stitcher, and on iTunes.
Isn't it pronounced the Sketcher?
I believe it is pronounced the Sketcher. You may be correct. If you could also please visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CanadianPatriotPodcast, and give us a like, I would really appreciate that because I would like to maintain my marginal lead against Tyler and the International Liberty or Death podcast.
Like 1 like.
2 likes today. 2 likes, baby.
Oh, you got 2 likes?
I got a new one.
Whatever, I'm killing you on Instagram.
One step at a time. First the Facebook, then the world. All right, so like we do every week, what are we drinking? Left to right on my screen, we're going to start with Tyler.
I'm drinking Rickards White out of a Belgian Moon glass. It's essentially the same beer. I think the only difference is Belgian Moon is brewed in the U.S. somewhere, and Rickards White's brewed in Montreal, but it's the same recipe as I understand it. And this is the glass that I got in Brockville after I sweet-talked the waitress into giving me a freebie. So, thank you.
A free glass, right?
Yeah.
Key distinction. What are you drinking, Marty?
I'm drinking Budweiser. It's in a bottle. This is the bottle that I got in the case of Budweiser that I got at my local beer store.
All right, then. That's.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
I got nothing.
I got a couple of Rickards Reds in front of me. I'm going to finish off the last of that lug tread. So yeah, same as last week.
Anybody have any cool stuff on their desks?
I literally sit at a table with a computer in front of me.
No. All right. Well.
All my cool stuff's on my workbench behind me because it makes an epic backdrop for the YouTube video.
All right. Well,
I've got assault rifles on my wall.
We'll plan for this next episode, maybe. Everybody can do show and tell of cool stuff they got.
hold shit up to my mic so you guys can hear it.
Yeah, what are you?
Exactly.
What's your aversion to a webcam? I don't.
Shitty rural internet.
All right. Good enough answer, I guess.
Yeah, but you
I
can do
have a
whatever
hard
you
enough
want.
time getting voice through.
So far away.
You have a hard enough time getting boys through? What?
Yeah, just the lag is huge.
Yeah. All right. Sorry to derail.
No, it's all good. We're 7 minutes in, and it's time for derailment.
Yeah.
All right. So, shall we talk about the weekend?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, I put on a firearms course in Guelph through my training company, Ragnarok Tactical, which you can find at ragnaroktactical.ca, and Tyler was good enough to come down and spend the day with us and do some shooting.
Yeah, I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me down. I never shot at the Guelph Rod and Gun Club either. It's a pretty nice place. If I lived a little closer, I'd consider joining.
It's not bad as ranges go in this area.
Yeah, I remember we kind of had that discussion when the course was all done, just about costs and what you get for your membership dues, and it seemed to be a pretty good deal for people in the GTA. But it's full, isn't it?
You don't mind that. Yeah, it is. It's artificially capped at 800 members because Saturday mornings are very, very busy.
Yeah, like Silverdale.
Yeah, but the rest of the week, if you show up Monday to Friday during daylight hours, odds are you're there by yourself.
Yeah. So I don't know how much detail you want to go into about the course, or if you want me to kind of give you my experiences, but maybe for the listeners' sake, people who are interested in taking the course, just kind of give them a brief synopsis of what the course entails.
Okay, let's do that. I didn't plan my show notes accordingly.
Whoops.
Yeah, I'll fix it in post. So this was what I call the AR-15 operator course. This is a intermediate level of instruction. Somebody that's sort of already familiar with the AR-15 and looking to really take it to that next level, be a better competitive shooter, get off the bench, and actually do something. Can I steal a Magpul word and call it dynamic?
Absolutely. But if you're going to do that, you have to play a Magpul drinking game, and you have to drink every time the word dynamic or some variation thereof is used.
Oh, this is going to get sloppy quickly.
The worst one is Art of the Dynamic Gun. You have to pound like 3 or 4 beers in the first 10 minutes. Anyway, just a fun tip for the listeners. It's a great time.
Amazing. So, yeah, the course is really designed for the AR-15 owner that sort of designed for the AR-15 owner that has an idea about how their firearm operates, but wants to really push themselves on that competitive level. Because I'm really training for competitive shooting. I don't do the whole military law enforcement aspect very much. It's very much flat range centric, which is a little different. And my opinion is there's not a lot of great training outfits in this area. There's a couple places in southern Ontario you can get some high quality firearms training. There's a couple other places if you're willing to drive a little bit still in Ontario or into other provinces where you can get some good training. But my opinion, there's a really strong lack of especially long gun, like quality long gun training in southern Ontario. So my goal here is really to address that and give people a place where they can train and do things that are closer to what you experience in competitions, whether it's like IPSC rifle or 3-gun or service rifle or CQB, that you don't get just like standing at a bench shooting.
Yeah, and for those reasons, I thought it was really valuable because you're right. There's really limited options for rifle work in the province. I know you've done the TDSA course, and I've done the TDSA course as well, and had a great time there. Obviously, there are things to be learned there. Lots of quality instruction to be had.
Oh, for sure. Don't take this as a detractor from what Scott and TDSA does at all. They're a good training outfit. There's just a lack of good training outfits in this part of Ontario, in this part of Canada.
Yeah, there's only so many, and realistically speaking, you can really only have a course of 10 to 12 people, and then you're kind of maxed out. You just can't give people the individual attention they need, so they fill up. And anyway, so but the courses based on my experience having taken both courses now, that there are like distinct differences between the two. and I think makes your course really, really valuable. But we'll get into the details there of like kind of what we did during the day a little bit later. I just wanted to indicate that you were talking about CQB, IPSC rifle, 3-gun. I've literally done none of those things. I've only competed kind of informally at my club with other guys, and everybody runs an AR. I mean, we obviously kind of open it up to everybody, and then we just kind of create like a handicap class if people want to shoot like a 9mm carbine or something like that, or a 22, just, to come out and get shooting. But, doing this kind of thing, it really gets me excited for doing the 3-gun thing. I hope Ontario Action Shooting gets something rolling next year, and I hope to see all the guys that we saw out on Saturday participating in that type of thing too.
I'd love to see those people. I mean, that's really the reason that I'm doing this. Part of it is just to give them the opportunity to run the AR the way that it's designed, not shooting off of a bench. But part of it is definitely for those people that want to get into competitive shooting, to give them the skill set that they need to be, like, to actually be competitive when they show up at one of these matches.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, sort of as an overview of the course that I ran on Saturday, we had 11 students come out, of which Tyler was one. And we ran, I think it was a 6-hour program. It actually ended up being a little bit faster than I was expecting because we did have the opportunity to shoot steel. And not having to patch and do target changes and stuff really sped up the afternoon. So my morning was pretty much right on where I planned my course plan when we were shooting cardboard and doing diagnostic work and getting everybody figured out where they're shooting and getting everybody, getting the fundamentals down. And then we started working on some of the more advanced stuff and starting to combine different skills together and using the steel targets for feedback. And I think all but one person was able to use the steel targets because they were shooting Russian surplus 7.62x3.9, and I don't want to replace my AR-500 targets, so I made them shoot paper.
You could just make the guy buy the target.
Well, and that was kind of what I told him, was if he wants to shoot my target and then have targets when he was done, we could work out an arrangement, and he wasn't really down with that.
Yeah, that's too bad, because I wonder if he knew he would be excluding himself from steel by using that ammunition.
Yeah, I think that's something that I need to publicize more in the future. I did include in the course information that was emailed out that we would be shooting steel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I expressly stated that you could not shoot steel core ammo at it.
Yeah, I think some guys just don't get it. Like, you remember at the beginning of the course when you mentioned that one guy, he had Russian ammunition, Russian 223. I think it was Barnaul, or maybe it was MFS, but it was that it has the bimetal jacket, lead core, and then the lacquered steel case. His ammunition was right. Like, he didn't understand. Like, he said, I have a steel case, but you were referring to a steel core, and he didn't understand the distinction between the two. So there are a lot of guys who don't necessarily have the technical expertise to really kind of just have that information, inferred.
Learning experience for me as an instructor. The next time that we have a course where we get to shoot steel, I'll just have to make sure that it's expressly clear that steel core ammo doesn't get to shoot the steel because you damage the steel and you cause other hazards on the range.
Yeah, for sure.
How did you feel about lunch?
Lunch was fantastic.
Lunch was fantastic. So
great.
One of my criticisms with most of the shooting courses that I have been on with various instructors is lunch is normally either like brown bag or pizza or Subway. And when you're right?
That's been my experience, yeah.
And like I'm a pretty big dude and I really enjoy eating. It is one of my hobbies. So when there is a lack of high-quality hot food for my lunch, I mean, preferably the charred flesh of an animal, it offends me deeply.
As you do. But
So
in my experience, at TDSA's TAC Rifle 1, somebody's wife prepared something similar to what you had arranged for. It was like a whole roast. It was like a giant, like, deep dish pan, like something you'd do a turkey in. And it was just all sliced roast beef, like bathing in gravy, and then we had buns and all that. Very similar to what we had on the weekend. But then every subsequent course, it was Subway, which isn't terrible. It's not terrible.
It's not terrible, but when you're dropping...
I want a hot meal. I want something hearty.
At $200+ for a course, and I was... the course that I ran will be $200 in the future. This was sort of a a feeler to make sure this is a viable business, so we ran this at a discount. But when I'm dropping $200 or more on a course to go and train, and there's no lunch, or lunch is like mediocre, I question the value exchange, you know?
Yeah, you feel a little ripped off, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that like everybody that came out to my event walked away, you know, they were feeling full, they were happy, we were ready to go back to work on the range. I think we might have actually overfed some people because there was a lot of lethargy after lunch. There was a lot of like sitting around and like, I need a minute.
Yeah, I think that was in part, like we didn't have intense sun. We did at times, but we had cloud cover for most of the day. We had kind of looming threats of a thunderstorm for a lot of the day, actually. But we had really high humidity, and you could tell towards the end of the day that had really taken its toll on a lot of guys. Like, do you remember when we were doing the lateral movement drills on the steel? I had probably run that drill 3-4 times before guys had run it their second time because people were so unwilling to cycle out of the shade to step up to the firing line.
Yeah, which I guess, I mean, that's just part of shooting in the summertime in southern Ontario. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it's another Saturday on the range, so I'm pretty unfazed to it. But I suppose, yeah, if you're not accustomed to it, I could see how that would be difficult. And I did do my best to kind of try to combat that by providing frozen water and a cooler full of cold water.
Yeah, that was great.
Like, trying to encourage people to, you know, stay hydrated.
Having access to that, and just another point on the food is if you're going to have a course that's an all-day thing in the heat, people are hoisting their rifle, they're carrying the rifles essentially all day, and their ammunition. It can be very physically taxing on people who have done nothing but shoot at a bench, and being able to feed them, like giving them the calories and the energy they need to actually participate in the course is actually really important, because then otherwise you have people crashing at 1-2 o'clock. Like, you got to feed them, you got to keep them hydrated and well fed and happy. And for the most part, other than people really kind of succumbing to the heat, I felt like there was great participation from the students. People were generally like very enthusiastic and upbeat, and it just went really well.
Yeah, it was a really good class. I liked everybody on the class. I haven't shot with most of those people before. Obviously, there's a few people that I've shot with that I know. I think that was pretty obvious, like who the people were that I knew, because I could kind of rip on them a little bit harder when they started doing things that I knew they, like, you know better, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because my style of instruction is very informal compared to a lot of other sort of shooting programs that I've been through. And I recognize that, like, I realize that I do a very informal course.
I don't think anybody was put off by it, though. I think most people appreciate it. Like, the kind of crowd that you're going to get at an AR-15 course, you're not going to get, you know, soft-headed losers who can't handle it, who want, you know, kind of the other kind of instruction, super formal, super rigid, and people can generally be one of the guys.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was going for, was, yeah, okay, we're doing professional training, but you all need to get along with one another, you all need to look after one another's safety on the range. You all do need to listen to what I'm saying, because there are reasons why I'm saying that. And we did at a couple of points have like feedback on the range while we were doing stuff. Like when we were doing shooting from the prone, getting into the prone position rapidly. And one of the guys said, "Well, I do this another way." Okay, we'll do that 3 or 4 times for everybody to see, and we'll see which of us is more worn out, you or me, right? Okay, now everybody try it his way. You decide for yourself which way you like better. Okay, you like it my way, great. If you liked it his way, that's fine. We can work on that, but his way is slower. So just like be aware of that.
Could you describe his way versus your way? Because I had a thought on one versus the other, but it requires people to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so the way that I teach prone shooting, getting into the prone position rapidly, you take a check pace with your right foot, so you plant your left foot, you take a half pace with your right foot, and you actually drop to a double kneeling position. Your support hand comes off the rifle, and you use that to break your fall, and you go from a double kneeling into the prone position, and you use your support side hand so that you catch yourself and you don't win yourself, and then monopod the rifle. The other method that was brought up during the course was using your support side hand to establish a position on the ground and then like do a donkey kick out to drop the rest of your body onto the ground.
Yeah, and what I didn't like about that was, in order to do the donkey kick, you have to, in part, suspend your upper body which is not necessarily the best thing, because you might get sympathetic movement. If you're supporting your upper body with your left hand, your right hand might contract, and if your finger is sloppy with the trigger, you can set the gun off, for one. But the other thing was, if you're wearing something like a plate carrier, body armor, or you have like a 3-liter hydration pack on your back, you're now having to carry a lot of weight in order to execute that maneuver. And that was something that I thought wasn't necessarily the most efficient way to get into a comfortable shooting position. And then the third thing was, again, with the plate carrier, a plate carrier properly worn, it's suspended above your belt line. And although I try and keep myself as fit as possible, if I bend over, I will be able to pinch skin between the bottom of my armor plate on my chest and my belt buckle, and it's not pleasant. So if I was to contract my upper body and fall down in that kind of contracted position and then kick my legs out, I could potentially slam skin between steel, and it wouldn't be the best thing ever. No, so I preferred your method. Your method was a lot better.
I like my method, but I mean, somebody brought it up on the course, and I'm happy to address it. And we did try both ways to see which people preferred, and I think the general consensus was my way might be slightly slower, but it was a lot more repeatable, and it was a lot less prone to having other issues crop up.
Yep. And I think consistency is way more important than some gimmicky thing that you might be able to execute quickly and properly some of the time. Being able to execute something consistently and efficiently, I think, is way more important when it comes to, your manual of arms and everything when it comes to body positioning and manipulation of whatever you need to do.
So I guess the other thing is kudos to you for wearing that plate carrier all day, because I think you were the only person that was, I'm going to say, manly enough to do that.
I threw it on right in the morning, and there was a guy who, I can't remember his name. I feel really bad about it, but I'm sorry if you're listening. He had been listening to New Shooter Canada and heard the story about the plate carrier from Brockville, and he asked me if I was Tyler from Liberty or Death podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, and this is the plate carrier. I'm like tugging on it,
Nice.
But I have 1/4-inch Air 500 steel plates front and back. They're about 7.5, 8 pounds each, but I use a high ground plate carrier, and the load distribution on that is so perfect. It's really not. It's not that heavy. It's not that heavy. The worst thing is the sweat between your chest and your back and the plate carrier. That's easily the most uncomfortable thing about wearing it. But the weight distribution is excellent. It's definitely a quality product I'd recommend.
Right on. So I guess. What else should we talk about with that? There was I planned for 250 rounds for the day. I told people to bring 300 so they'd have extra, because I knew we were shooting steel, and steel is a bullet magnet.
Yeah, I didn't count my rounds. I'm sure it was in and around there. I might have fired 300, maybe. I'm not sure, but I just brought an ammo can that was like 1/4 to 1/3 full, and they'll hold like I think it's a 308 can. They'll hold like 1,200. 50 rounds, so I was kind of in and around where we needed to be, and I had some extra in the vehicle, but I ended up burning through enough where I could see the bottom of the can at the end of the day, and
nice.
I didn't feel like there was any dull moments where we weren't putting enough rounds down range. What I really liked about the way you organized the course actually was you didn't have everybody sit around and be lectured for 2 hours. You interspersed the lessons with particular drills, and so that way when people were kind of getting like a little bit hot and sweaty, we could kind of retreat back to the shooting bay area, and then we could talk about things for 10-15 minutes and then go back to the firing line, because that was one of my criticisms of the pistol course that we did a few weeks ago in Brockville, was that we stood around and talked for 90 minutes, and the course could be paced a little bit better. So I thought you did a great job with that. I really liked the way it was broken up.
Yeah, and again, I think that comes back to like I've done enough of these as a student, and I set this up as like what would be like my ideal course, like how would I want to receive this instruction, which I think plays a big part into the way that I teach. But I have a background in professional instruction, so I mean, it's not like a new thing for me to stand in front of a group of people and explain a skill. I don't get to do it with AR-15s every day like I wish I could, but. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I deliver professional instruction on a frequent basis, and I'm constantly getting recertified on that as part of my professional development. So applying what I know for other kinds of instruction to the AR-15 is a pretty simple, it's a pretty simple transition. Like, what you're teaching changes, but the way you teach doesn't change.
Yeah, I get that. For sure.
So I guess some of the topics that we cover, we should probably go through so people get an idea about how we spent the day shooting, not just burning 300 rounds. Because that's another criticism that I have of some courses that I've taken in the past have been very high round count with very little, there's a significant plateau on, your return on investment. Like, after you burn the first couple of hundred rounds, how much are you really gaining after that? Right?
The high round count thing it has its benefits and it has its unnecessary properties, and I think the high round count thing really benefits totally fresh off the boat shooters, totally new people to the game, and that they might have they might be nervous when they shoulder the gun. They might be recoil shy. They might even be intimidated just by the noise. And just getting them to just fire the gun and just get accustomed to it, it really does a lot to mitigate your body's flinch reaction. I do think there's value in that, but there are better ways to go about it. And I thought that the round count was appropriate for the amount of time we spent on the range. And yeah, I think the drills were very well focused. We worked with. We started the day just getting a feel for everybody's skill level. Just produce, a tight group, 5 rounds at 10 yards. And you could see that
I like working at 10 yards. 10 yards is easy for people. Even if they don't have magnified optics, they can see their hits. It's a good diagnostic stage for me as an instructor because I can see what you're doing. I don't care if you're at 10 yards or you're at 100 yards, you're going to do it the same way. So it doesn't matter to me watching you shoot to go around and make that adjustment. But for you as a shooter, being at 10 yards, you can still see the impact to see whether or not you're doing it well or not without having to actually go up and look at the target.
I actually could not see my hits because it's a dirt berm behind a brown target, so the holes I made were just nothing. There was no light shining through. For you as the instructor moving back and forth behind the firing line, you would see light looking at targets if you weren't facing them directly. But I actually couldn't see my hits, and I'm assuming it was the same for everybody.
Okay, well that's something good to work on. Maybe we can change up some target colors because we were just shooting regular cardboard IDPA style targets. The man.
But I don't really feel like anybody really suffered for it. Most of the groups we saw, maybe they weren't the best groups that these guys could ever shoot, but they weren't awful. Most at least the guys that were immediately next to me anyway.
Yeah, no, everybody shot fairly well to start. We basically repeated the same drill at the end of the day, and everybody shot, I think with one or maybe 2 exceptions to that, everyone shot significantly better at the end of the day. I realized part of that is okay, you've spent the whole day on the range shooting.
Yeah, fatigue.
So you're going from not warmed up to, now you're on the opposite end. Okay, now you're warmed up, you've been shooting all day, but now you're also tired and you're ready to go home and have a beer and chicken wings.
Oh, yeah.
So, some of the topics that we cover, just straight nomenclature. We do show and tell in the morning because we're gun people. Everybody likes to show off their stuff. It's like going to a car convention. Everybody's got to pop the hood and see what's going on, right?
And what were you shooting?
I just brought my little SBR, so it's just a home built on a spikes lower with a bunch of other random assorted components in it. It's just a little 11.5-inch gun with a Vortex 1-4. What did you run for the course, Tyler?
I ran a Colt Canada IUR on a Ruger SR556 lower, and it performed, as expected for me. It was reliable, with the exception of 2 rounds in a row. I don't have them in front of me, unfortunately, but 2 rounds in a row failed to properly chamber, but they chambered enough for the trigger group to function properly. And so once I pulled the trigger and heard click and not bang, I just cycled the round out and let the charging handle fly, and same thing happened, 2 rounds in a row. Very strange. Both cases I recovered after the drill, and they both have deep gouges in them and no marks on the primer. So I think that what I had done is after the first first time it went click and not bang, I assumed there was nothing in the chamber. So I did the tap, rack, bang. Except there was no bang, it was tap, rack, click. And then I had to do it a second time. Again, I smashed the magazine, and then on the third round, it went off. So I'm thinking that the magazine, I just didn't properly seat it, but it was seated deep enough for the bolt carrier group to pick up a round. But for people who understand the internal workings of an AR, if the magazine is lower than it's supposed to be, then that round is not going to self-guide into the chamber properly, and it's going to crash into the recesses in the chamber extension, the barrel extension. So I'm thinking that's where those marks on the cases came from. But anyway, other than that, the gun ran fine, cycled flawlessly. I'm assuming that the issues I did have were operator error. But it ran really well. I think I was the only guy running an EOTech site.
Yes, you're the only EOTech. There were a couple of red dots. We had some aim points. Vortex red dots were very popular. There were a couple of guys with magnifieds, and we had a couple of guys just running straight up irons. People
don't want to spend the money. And I think that was clear. That's something you get. Like when my first AR was a Northeastern Arms, mostly made of Northeastern Arms parts. I built it. It was 18-inch Northeastern Arms upper, lower, Northeastern Arms handguard, and I just went straight up irons. And I tried to build it on the cheap. I think I was like $10.50 all in by the time it was done. And you could, like a lot of these guys at the beginning of the course, when we did our little intro thing, what we're shooting, why we're taking the course. Most of these guys are saying, I got my gun 3 months ago, I got my gun 6 months ago, I got my gun a year ago, I just want to learn more about it. They were relatively new shooters, or at least to the AR platform, relatively new to the AR platform, and I'm assuming, therefore, that this would be their first gun, their first AR.
Yeah, and, I think a lot of those guys it was.
Yeah, and so generally speaking, when you get into something, you try and get cheap. Generally, you try and really pinch your pennies and go for high value, low cost. And I think it's when you go, as you continue to put these courses on, you put in like the next tier of instruction, you'll see these guys coming back with aim points and EOTechs and the higher dollar stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we had that conversation about a lot of stuff. Like we had people that were running what I think of as like basically like airsoft vests. Like it was just like surplus store black tactical vest with pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple of guys running some HSGI gear. I loaned out a bunch of stuff. I loaned out some HSGI and some tactical tailored stuff. We had people show up with slings because this is a sling course because I don't believe in having rifles that don't have slings on them. That doesn't make sense. How else do you do other things with your hands?
Yep.
So we had a lot of people show up with like the, well, I got a Norinco and it came with this from the factory. I've never put it on. How do I hook the sling up?
Step 1, remove it from the packaging. Step 2, throw it in the garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I probably spent like 25 minutes first thing in the morning just setting up slings for people so they could like get their guns going.
Yeah. What's your preferred sling? What were you running?
I've tried a number of slings over the last 5 or 6 years. I've pretty much settled on the Blue Force Gear 2-point sling at this point, the Vickers sling.
A lot of guys swear by it. Is One Shot Tactical still the guy that he's like the main retailer?
He's the importer. Yeah, he's the importer for Blue Force Gear. And for me, it's hard to beat the Blue Force Gear sling because it's stupid simple, and it's effective, right? And it's not going to break the bank.
Yeah.
Do you go padded or non-padded?
I go non-padded because I'm a big dude. I have enough padding as it is. If I ran a heavier AR, I could see the advantages in the padding, especially if I ran something like that wasn't a 223 pattern like AR-15. Like if I ran a large frame AR, or if I ran like a big heavy SIG or something, I could totally see the advantages in doing the padded. But for what I do, there's enough meat on the bones. A little bit of padding's not going to make a difference to me.
What I really liked actually about your setup is when, I don't know what you were doing, but you went from carrying the gun in like a patrol carry configuration to having it slung on your back pretty much instantly. I thought that was pretty cool. That's not something I'd be able to do as smoothly with my single point.
No, I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Single point slings have a place. So do 2-point slings. It really depends on what you're doing with the rifle, and it really depends on the way that you want to use the rifle.
Mm-hmm.
again, for the kind of shooting that I'm normally involved in with service condition stuff and with teaching and with being on the range, I like to keep my hands free. And if I'm using my long rifle, like my 18-inch AR, I don't like getting whacked in the man bits. The man bits are, we're going to say, delicate and important to me. So a single point sling on a full-size rifle is not like a good combo, right? On an SBR, it's fine because you're not going to whack yourself in the man business. But it just depends on what you're doing with it, right?
Props it up for it, right?
Sorry.
What's that, Roboto?
You wear so like plate carrier and that's got to prop it up off you, right?
I think Marty's saying that having a plate carrier helps keep it from whacking the junk, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're kind of breaking up, sorry. But yes, the plate carrier does, to a degree, mitigate your ability to smash your own nuts with your own rifle. Yeah. Especially because my plates aren't contoured. I just run straight plates with no bends. I had my steel manufacturer cut them for me. They're not manufactured plates for retail. And yeah, I've just they're comfortable for me, and I haven't had any issues with discomfort or anything like that. What I am finding is that generally speaking, kind of like as Andrew was talking about, the longer the barrel, the longer your rifle, the larger your rifle, the more issues you're going to have carrying the rifle in that configuration in front of you. I would find I run, like I said, I have the Colt Canada IUR with a standard barrel, so that's a 15.7-inch barrel. When you bend down to pick stuff up, you need to suspend that rifle with one hand so it doesn't crash into the ground, and you got to be wary of that type of thing. Now, most guys are going to be running muzzle brakes of some kind, but for people who don't have threaded barrels or people who are just running like a thread protector or something like that, you sit down or you crouch down to pick up brass or something or magazines, and say the ground's a little bit muddy, you could have the muzzle under your barrel plug up with mud very easily, and you won't know it until you examine your gun later for some kind of damage. I don't know, but it's just something to be wary of.
So one of the things with the single versus a 2-point sling, how did you find the shoulder transitions? Because we shot strong hand and support side.
So shoulder transitions was something that I had done in a TDSA course that I had done a few years ago, and basically, if you're just running strong shoulder only, you would run your single point to a certain degree of like tightness so that the rifle was suspended, essentially so that you could rest your chin on the buttstock. Like it's carried relatively high on your person. And then it's just a matter of getting your strong hand on the rifle and your weak hand on the forend and shouldering the gun. And there's very little movement there. But that does not work when you need to transition to your weak shoulder because it's too tight. The sling gets in the way, and you cannot move the gun out of that position. So the way we ran it was basically when you intend or are planning for a transition, you would just loosen the sling up a little bit. But even then, I found that you would still catch the sling with the bottom part of the buttstock. And you were saying, a lot of guys running single points, you're just going to unclip it. So I tried that, and I found that was easier to work with. And if you're actively using the gun, no problem with unclipping it. And then when it's time to make the gun safe, just throw the clip back on and sling the gun.
Yeah, because with that's the thing that I ran into when I was running a single point sling on my SBR rifle. Doing that transition to my weak side, not that I do a lot of weak side shooting, but it's one of those things like I need to know how this is going to work, because some days when the zombies show up, I'm going to have to shoot around a corner, right?
Sure.
Right? Like, replace zombies with whatever the event is where you're finally going to have to get to break out your rifle and use it in the real world. And when I ran a single point sling, just getting that transition over to shoot on my support side was not doable without unclipping, which is why I teach it as you'll likely have to unclip this.
Mm-hmm.
With the 2-point sling, the way that I teach it is you actually drop your support side arm back through the sling so that it's just around your neck rather than under your arm.
That'd be easier, yeah.
And that allows you to just, because it's part of the movement you're doing anyway, because you break your grip on your support side hand and you bring it back to the fire control group. So all you're doing is bringing it back a little further, making sure you're clear of the sling, and then putting it into the fire control group. And then you have all the length of the sling just around your neck. Because it's just there for looks. It's not doing anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, the sling carries the gun when you're not actively using it, right? So, and the sling, to a degree, can provide another bracing point against your body, but for those purposes, obviously shooting off your weak shoulder, it's called your weak shoulder for a reason. It's not your ideal firing stance. So,
I guess we didn't really get into this very much except at the end of the course, and I don't like calling it your weak side. I call it your support side.
okay.
And I do that because we touched on this at the end of the course. We talked a little bit about positive self-talk. And I don't like referring to something as your weak side, because that gives it like an inherent disadvantage to using that side.
It gives you the excuse for bad shooting.
Well, that's what I mean, and that's something we talked about. That's the same thing. Why at the end of the course I said, if you have criticisms, come and let me know. But when we go around the circle and talk about like our day, I want you to tell me something that you learned, something that was a positive, because I want to reinforce that positive self-talk. Because at the end of the day, what we're training for is shooting sports. I mean, zombies and all the other stuff aside, the goal of the course is to make you a better competitive shooter. So if you're focusing on things that didn't go well, when it's time to perform under pressure, and the pressure is just the timer going beep and you being on the clock, you're going to focus on the things that you don't do well. And that's not what I want to train students to do. I want to train them on things that they're going to excel at.
Yeah, I was just having beers with Jeff, panelist on the show here, and we were talking about our shotgun match that we had a few weeks back, and he did better than me, and he's kind of like my rival because I did better than him in the match before, and so this is going to be a thing. We're going to bring it up in the future. Don't worry about that. But I just said, like I had a great time on the final stage, and I did really well. I think I was like 7th overall or something for that particular stage, and it was because I blasted all of the clays on like the first shot. And other guys, because all these clays were moving on swingers, they were very difficult to hit. Other guys would blow 4 or 5 shots before they'd smash them, that type of thing. So that was kind of the way I would positively reinforce my shooting and kind of give myself a pat on the back for the right choke selection, that type of thing. And so yeah, so I understand there's a lot that goes into creating positive feedback loops for yourself and not getting too beat up about making the miss, but making the hits that you do make, and just going forward, coming up with your own personal training plan, what you need to work with. Jeff, for example, he had a miserable time on that particular stage with these 2 swingers, and because the clays were on, there was 2 clays would be exposed on either side of a wall at the same time. So it was very difficult to like engage both of them in a quick fashion. So he just said, I'm going to build one of those targets. That was his takeaway. Very positive. Like I'm going to master shooting at this type of target. And so that shotgun obviously doesn't really apply to the course here, but just for the positive thing, like none of the people that I associated with anyway, they don't get all beat up and discouraged. It's all positive, and everybody is so good. Everybody in the gun community that I've ever really associated with is positive and reinforcing. They're always willing to help each other out. For example, at the course, I was right at the beginning, I was like, hey, somebody has a malfunction. I've built a ton of ARs. I know how they're supposed to work. Andrew, I don't want to take you off the line. You pay attention to the people that need you. I'll deal with the nonsense. Everybody's in it to help each other, and that's what I love about this community.
For sure. And it's good. I'm glad that I had you and Gavin that's not here tonight. Gavin was good enough to come and take pictures. We had another photographer come up and take pictures. The wife helped organize the lunch. I'm very happy with the way that course ran. I'm very happy with the caliber of individual that came out to participate.
Yeah, and I would say, based on my previous experience with not necessarily AR-15 specific courses, but let's get real here. If it's a tactical rifle course, it's going to be mostly AR-15s. The skill set that I saw in the other shooters on the line was generally of a higher caliber, despite their relatively young age in the AR world. Most of these guys were competent. The only awkward thing I saw on the line was a guy using the charging handle to get the carrier group and a new round back into battery after changing a magazine, rather than using the bolt release. That was the only awkward thing that I saw.
Yeah, he didn't get to do that for very long. I went over and asked him what he was doing.
Exactly. So most of the guys, they definitely been playing with their guns. They're definitely they had spent the time to figure out how they worked, and generally very competent in handling. So I was definitely happy with what I saw because hey, I wear the plate carrier to train, but I also wear the plate carrier to protect myself from idiots on the range. And all these guys they kept their guns pointed where they were supposed to, and they cleared their guns when they were instructed to. So it was definitely a good group.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I keep on a pretty like eagle eye on. But I mean, we did say at the beginning of the day, this is a big boy course. You're expected to know what's going on, and if you don't, you need to ask for direction. But like the expectation is you're going to walk around with a cold gun. So I don't know if you caught this in the morning. I was very particular about yelling out words of command. Oh, you're finished shooting. Unload, clear your firearm, bolt forward, hammer down, hear the click, close the dust cover, right?
Yep.
Like going through the process. Now, did you hear me yelling that as much at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
No, towards the end of the day, it was just clear them and hang them.
Yeah, and that was exactly because that's the level of profession, because it's big boy rules.
Yep.
And I mean, like, I am there to run a safe range, but I'm also there to teach, and I'm not there to handhold. So, I mean, I'll run people through it in the morning so they get in the habit of doing it. But after a couple of hours of doing it, the expectation is big boy rules. You need to be able to do this.
Yeah, and based on what I could observe, the most novice guy, or maybe not most novice, but the one who seemed to be most uncomfortable handling his rifle was David, the guy who shot next to me on the line. And by 2-3 hours into the course, he was clearing it. He was doing his thing, no problem. Raising the bar for these guys does them more favors than holding their hands. And
exactly, and that's the way I prefer to teach. I mean, like, I'm there to help, but I want these guys to get better at it so that when I'm not there, they're still going to be proficient operators.
And they were good. I had like I said, great group of guys. Really, really good class. So what else did we cover? We did. We started out doing the group shooting, and then you went around and you corrected everybody's firing stance, their foot placement.
Yeah. We talked about foot placement. We talked about firing stances. We talked a little bit about dealing with the sight offset, just basically that we were very close to the target, so you will shoot low. Because I'm not getting into the particulars of how to deal. Okay, so it's 1.6 inches at this, and just figure out where you're shooting and put the rounds in the paper. You're fine. It's a big target.
Yeah, and let's just say shooting at let's just say all these guys are training to defend the nation when Putin invades or something. I don't know. Who cares? If you're shooting 2 inches low at a man-sized target, it's still going to hurt him. It's still going to ruin his day. It doesn't matter.
So, like, we didn't spend a lot of time on that. We talked about it very briefly. We spent, I think, a significant amount of time on immediate actions and stoppages, how to deal with the gun not working. So that's your tap, rack, and bang. We also talked about some of the other less frequent symptoms of problems with the AR-15, brass over bolt, failure to eject, those sort of things.
Did that happen once? I thought I heard somebody say that happened once.
We didn't have any brass over bolt. We did have a failure to eject, and we did have one guy have like a self-induced double feed.
So did he have a stuck case, and then he just reefed on the charging handle and fed a fresh round into it? What did he do?
Yeah, he had a stuck case, and he just jammed another round into the he'd tap, rack, bang. He didn't look at the action to see what was going on, which is something I was harping on, was you have to roll the gun over and actually look at where the bolt is.
And that helps with throwing the mag out of the rifle. If you can't hit the one way first, and then...
Yes, the dynamic magazine release. So I think we've spent a fairly significant amount of time on immediate actions and stoppages, and we did have a few throughout the day, so I think it was a good use of our time there.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time on magazine changes, and again, because that comes up as we go into the other stuff, you have to be proficient at it. And the standard that I want to train people to is 3 seconds. You should be able to pull the trigger, do a magazine change, and pull the trigger again in under 3 seconds.
Yep.
And for the most part, everybody was there. We might have had 1 or 2 people that were like 3.2, but like there was nobody that was like atrocious.
Yeah, and I mean, like I had the odd magazine change during the day where I didn't grab it properly, where my hand angle was wrong and my index finger slipped off the spine of the mag, but you're already in the middle of the motion, so you just grab it anyway and try and fire it into the rifle, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it happens, but exactly, you just need to conquer the situation that you've handed yourself.
Well, and I spent a lot of time yelling at people about that. And I say yelling, I mean, really, I was just speaking in a loud enough voice that I could be heard on a line with, people shooting assault rifles.
Mhm.
But I
But I
spent a
think
lot
you
of
did a
time
nice
yelling
job
at
with
people,
that.
like, driving the magazine, getting after that, and like trying to encourage people to move with a sense of urgency.
Mhm.
Because there was a point there where it's okay, you're getting used to doing a mag change, you've never had to do this under pressure, I'm not going to rush people. But after lunch, when we started shooting steel, I don't care if you ran out of ammo, figure it out.
Yeah. And I was just trying to get a feel for how you were running the range. Unless instructed otherwise, as soon as I ran dry, I would just ram another magazine into the gun. And then when you said, clear them and hang them, then I would rack a live round out and drop my mag, all that. Not in that order. Remove the mag, then rack the live round
Remove
out.
the mag, then rack the round. Yeah. So
yeah.
we spent some time on that. We spent a lot of time on moving and shooting. We did both firing on the move when you're advancing towards the target, as well as shooting while you're doing lateral movement. Which I think was a big thing. A lot of the guys came back and said that they had not got a lot of experience with that, which from my perspective doesn't make a lot of sense because as a 3-gun shooter, you should be shooting while you're moving. Unless you're like required to be in a shooting box, the more things you can do at the same time will reduce your speed, reduce your time on the stage, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I found, obviously that was very useful because there's a lot of things that go into play, right? Obviously maintaining a steady sight plane, like maintaining a certain upper body level of steadiness. There's a lot of light work that goes into it. The footwork, which foot is leading the other, maintaining your shooting stance, maintaining your upper body angle to the target, all of that. There's a lot that goes into it. Fortunately for us, we're on a manicured gun range where the ground is level, but maybe in like the level 3 or level 4 course, we'll be throwing obstacles in there or whatever. But I always like doing stuff like that because that's not stuff that I practice, and that was one of my primary positive comments on the course was the kneeling and the prone work and the movement. They're just not a lot of people do. Like you said, a lot of guys just shoot the rifle off a bench, and that's generally what I do when I go to the range. Then we have the odd night, maybe every other week, maybe once a month, where we try and throw together like a rifle stage with movement and shooting around cover and things like that. So I thought that was like hugely beneficial. The movement is huge, and you could definitely see guys have no problem hitting the steel from a standing position or from a kneeling position, but as soon as you throw movement into it, where they're moving forwards or sideways or backwards, which we didn't do in this course, but anytime you throw movement into it, all of a sudden their gun starts hopping all over the place and they can't hit anything. So that's definitely a huge skill set to work on, and that's anytime you throw a challenge in front of me, I love it.
That's good. We talked a little bit about the transitions already, but that was another thing that we spent a significant amount of time working on was transitioning the firearm from the strong side to the support side.
And then we spent a little bit target to target.
Target to target was the last thing I was going to hit on. Was kind of how we finished out the instruction for the day was doing target transitions, and the targets were only 12 feet apart. Maybe it wasn't a big, but it was enough. Like it started messing with people.
Yeah. And we're shooting at these targets at the end of the day. We're shooting at about 40 yards, 45 yards.
Yeah, it was just about 45 yards we were shooting at. It was just as far as I could get on that range. Was still being within the berms, and still being within what the CFO requires us to use, but it's being as far away from the steel as I could get you. And then we finished up the day with just like a confirmation drill, and it was basically just back to the basics. Give me the best 5-round groups you can give me. We did a couple other things on the cardboard before we finished up, but I mean, really, that was kind of the cool down period, and then giving me like that good take your time on your own pace, give me like a nice solid 5-round group, and we did that a couple of times for everybody so they could kind of like shake everything out before we packed up the guns. So I guess before we move into the other,
go ahead.
No, I was going to transition, so I'll just fix this.
I was just going to say that was a great way to end the course. For a lot of guys, they could really see that their groups tightened up as they became, more accustomed to the platform. They'd improved their shooting stance, their footwork, everything, and I feel like a lot of guys probably got a lot of positive feedback just when you had everybody come up and observe their target before patching it up, and a lot of the guys are probably really seeing the results of their work, or of your work. So I had a great time, and like I said, the prone work and the kneeling work, that was stuff that I had never done before in a course. So that was obviously something I'd kind of done on my own time, but never received any formal instruction. And when you don't receive formal instruction, then there's no consistency. Like, you need somebody else to observe you, from a third-party position and say, no, you're doing it wrong. No, you need to put this knee down first, or you need to do this first, and then you get consistency. And when you have consistency, you get speed. And so I thought that was really beneficial from my perspective. I'd definitely be interested in more offerings that you have in the future.
Oh, good segue. So that was actually what I was going to talk about there. So some of the courses that I'm currently offering through RagnarokTactical.ca, don't worry, I fixed it. The RagnarokTactical.com does a redirect now. We have an AR-15 basics course, which is actually something I was teaching at a volunteer level last year. And it was just like literally pay enough so that we can like afford targets and like my gas to get to and from the range, and we weren't making any money. It was all just going to the gun club. So I'm now offering that as like a formal level of instruction, and it's a step below the operator course that we were doing this past weekend with what Tyler was on. Mm-hmm. And it's literally like, okay, so I bought my first AR, I don't know what to do. And then we have the AR-15 operator course, which is what we've been discussing. And the new program that I've just finished developing is the CQB operator course, which is designed for people that want to shoot service conditions CQB matches. So that's both handgun and carbine under 35 yards.
Interesting. I'd definitely be interested in that. I know you were talking about a lot of red tape and headaches with the ORA as of late, but definitely that style of competition would be something I'd be interested in doing, even if it's an outlaw thing.
Well, and I may end up just doing it as an outlaw thing, but there are skills that are directly translatable to 3-gun. There are skills that are, well, it's not even translatable. They are exactly what you need to do to excel at CQB-style shooting, whether that's with the ORA in Ontario or with the group in Valcartier in Quebec or out in BC. It's all the same skill set, and it's really applying all of the same fundamentals of marksmanship across 2 platforms, and just being proficient at both the rifle and the pistol. And there's no real... There's one of the things that I really want to get away from is the sort of the need in the firearms training community, especially what I see in the U.S. with the prerequisites. Well, if you want to take this course, you have to take our other course. I don't care. I mean, I do care up to a point, but these are all like, if you have a PAL, you're probably competent. Like, can you understand and follow the 4 rules of firearm safety? Cool. Then you can probably do this on my range, and you're not going to be a hazard to yourself or others. I mean, eventually, I would love to get to the point where I could offer like some serious advanced level courses where we do things that like may look dangerous to the casual observer. But
everything we do looks dangerous to the casual observer.
That's probably true.
Merely existing with a plate carrier is dangerous to the observer.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I would like to eventually get to that point, though, where like people start questioning whether or not we should be actually training these sort of skills, whether or not we're behaving in a safe manner, and I want to make sure that we are. But right now, any of the courses that are on the website, if you go check out RagnarokTactical.ca, there's no prerequisites for any of this. There's no like level 1, 2, and 3 that you have to do in order. I mean, it tells you on the website what you need to know in order to show up. Like with the AR-15 basics, it says this is designed for a new AR-15 owner. If you're a new AR-15 owner, it's for you. Like it's pretty dead simple. The AR-15 operator course says it's like an introductory AR course. So anybody that's got an AR and wants to run it better, that's who we're gearing it towards. CQB is a little bit different because we're doing a couple of things that start to get a little bit more dynamic. Drink. Because we're using both the rifle and the pistol. So, I mean, it does expressly say, though, students are expected to have an intermediate level of experience. So don't buy an AR and a handgun tomorrow and then show up to the class the next day because you're not going to be the kind of student that's going to gain anything from it, you know?
You'll get some trigger time.
You'll get trigger time, but you won't really... It's not designed for somebody that just bought a handgun and an AR.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess we should transition into the news.
What? You want to give the website one more time?
Yeah, sure. It's RagnarokTactical.com or .ca. It all goes to the same place. I'd prefer you were an awesome Canadian and used RagnarokTactical.ca, or check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/RagnarokTactical. There is no Instagram, no Twitter, no YouTube, none of that nonsense.
All right. So now we're done the 1 hour infomercial.
Yeah, pretty much. It went a little longer than I expected, but Tyler had lots of good questions. So
Yeah. Sounds like you guys had a good day.
yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed it. If I could get paid to just shoot guns all day, I would do that.
I believe that's called the military.
Yeah, no, I've done that. There's very little shooting of guns all day.
Actually, yeah, I hear there's very little shooting as well.
You could probably run around all day making pew-pew noises, but that would really cut into your other activities.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Canada Post Lockout a little bit.
All right.
So the good news, I guess, is they didn't do their lockout today, and the union, the CUPW, the Canadian Union, no
lockout, no strike.
No lockout, no strike. Canadian Union of Postal Workers, that's what it was. I should have written down what CUPW was.
Could have fooled me, though. I haven't received mail in 4 days.
I didn't receive mail at all last week.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the registration certificate for this guy.
I got junk mail. Does junk mail count?
Do you have... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't get any mail. We didn't get newspapers. We didn't get like even ads or anything, that kind of stuff. But they weren't on strike.
All right, we'll chalk that up to regular levels of incompetency then. So the good news is nobody's on strike, nobody's getting locked out. I guess it's important to make the distinction. Originally, this was going to be, if they had not been going to work today, it was going to be a lockout by the management at Canada Post, locking out the workers at CUPW. Although CUPW has made threats to go on strike, at this time there are no threats to actually go on strike. So the big point of contention seems to be the wages and the pensions.
Yeah.
All right, so for details, you can refer to the show notes. We have links to some news. The dividing issues with the wages is that the union wants rural and suburban mail carriers to be paid by the hour, like urban letter carriers, rather than by how many packages they deliver. So they're currently on like a per piece payment system.
Piecemeal system.
Yeah, piecemeal system.
Are they literally getting paid per piece of mail?
Per package, it said?
Yeah, in rural and some suburban carriers are being paid by item.
Wow.
Which I think applies generally to parcel carriers, not letter mail carriers, but I could be misconstruing things about how I understand how that system works. So the other argument that I've seen with this is that because the vast majority of rural package delivery people are female, that this is anti-feminist because the women are not being paid as much as the men, because it is more likely that a man is the package delivery person in an urban environment, whereas more likely that a woman is in charge of package delivery in a rural environment.
Why is
hashtag feminism because it's
a divide there?
Say that again?
Why would there be a divide there? Like, why would women be more likely in a rural?
I don't know why. I'm just reading. That's what I read in some of the news articles, was that it's more common for women to work in rural postal delivery than it is for men who tend to work more in urban postal delivery.
I'm going to assume it has something to do with men being more actively engaged in the farming operations in rural area. I don't know.
I mean, that would make sense. There was nothing in any of the articles that I read to expressly explain what the discrepancy is, but apparently it's anti-women to pay them less because the piecemeal system works out to a lower rate than the hourly system.
It's a market thing. It's not anti-woman. Ugh.
I know, right? Like I saw that and like I think it was a Huffington Post article. I just saw that and kind of shook my head, wrote it down for the show notes, and moved on. 'Cause I how do you even rebut that?
I don't know. But you know what? Like the logic that's applied to it, you can take that degree of absurdity and apply it in any other context. Like even if, let's say, that was like 75% men working doing like rural delivery, then they could just as easily argue that it's like discriminatory on the basis of like geographic, place of residence, that you're getting paid less. Like they could just argue that. They just throw market economics out the window, and that's why public sector sucks. That's why crown corporations suck, and that's why it should die and be privatized as soon as possible.
Well, isn't it sexist that they're hiring predominantly women?
Actually, Canada Post employees are majority male. I was doing a little bit of research before the show. It's like 62% male.
Yeah. Okay.
But because the people that work in the actual mail delivery part might not even form a majority of the workforce in a given area, because you have the mail sorters, you have the management, you have the people that transport things from sorting center to sorting center and distribution center to distribution center, etc.
So the
Not
other
to get too bogged down with details.
Yeah, not to get bogged down with the details. The other thing that the union seems to be upset about, that the union and the management can't come to an agreement over, is the new pension scheme that the Canada Post management has proposed, and they'd like to move all of their new hires to a defined contribution plan instead of the defined benefit plan that they've been using. Now, it's normal in the private sector for companies to use defined contribution plans because they reduce cost and they shift the risk to the future payouts on the employees. So essentially what this is there is concern, from what I can understand, amongst people of the union, that their pensions may not be there when they retire, which I think is a valid concern, but that applies to the vast majority of Canadians that have a work-sponsored pension plan already. So I'm not sure why the government employees feel that they should be entitled to something better.
Can we, just for a moment, explore the idea of what a pension plan is? In that, generally speaking, you belong to a union, and the union kind of negotiates this plan with the employer, where a portion of your wages are thrown into a slush fund, and generally the employer will also contribute a little bit, and then it is expected to mature at a specific set rate or better, and then when you're done working, you get the return on that investment. Is that more or less how you would describe a pension plan?
That is how my defined contribution plan with my employer works in the private sector.
Okay, so you could say that a pension would be an investment, right? And investments are not guaranteed to pay off. But what we have here with Canada Post is that they want the government to back up any losses that are incurred on the investment.
Yes, that is exactly the situation that we're in, because under the defined, what were they on before? The defined benefit plan?
Yeah.
The defined
Excuse me, I
benefit
misspoke earlier. I misspoke when I said they want the government to bail them out. I meant the taxpayer.
Yes, because it's a crown corporation. Yes. So I guess should we? Everybody should know what a crown corporation is, right? Like it's a business unit, a business entity, a company that is owned by some level of government in our country and is expected to make a profit. Doesn't have to make a big profit, but it is expected to turn a profit.
Mm-hmm.
That profit becomes revenue for the level of government which owns that crown corporation. Crown obviously referring to the monarchy, because we are a monarchy in Canada, whether people are willing to agree with me on that point or not.
Well, there's a bit of a logical fallacy when it comes to crown corporations, and I've actually, the first time I was actually exposed to this concept was concerning Canada Post, probably during one of the strikes, probably 2001, 1997 maybe. And it was that when the business is sluggish, then the employees and the management of the business, the Crown Corporation, the logic is that the government should invest. They should invest in more capital goods to make the business more competitive. And then when the business is doing well, when they're turning a profit, then the government should be more generous and pay them more. So like no matter what is going on, the attitude is that the government should be injecting more capital into the enterprise.
That is an interesting and flawed idea.
Yeah. And it's the same situation when it comes to citizens with government. When the economy is sluggish, the attitude of a lot of people is that the government should be dumping money into the economy to stimulate it. And then when the economy is good, they feel like, whoa, you're paying so much money into the system, you should be getting more out of it, right? So they should just be getting more money from the government at all times.
Yeah, I'm not okay with that because
Yeah,
really
no.
the fact that the government owns private business units notwithstanding, you don't get it both ways. The government.
Well, but that's
if we're
what they
gonna
want it
have to
both
own
ways. That's the
businesses-
problem.
Well, yes, that's the problem. Okay, so I guess this I have in the show notes, and we should discuss this. Does Canada Post really need to be a crown corporation? What value are they providing the owners, and in this case I mean the government, and in the government I mean the taxpayer? Why have we not privatized this? Why are we having a national postal service that's run by our federal government?
Serve it up to Marty.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is a role for providing, especially for rural areas, like extreme rural areas. I'm thinking like way up north and things like that, where they do need to have some level of service, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be run by the government. That could easily just be tendered out to a private company as well.
See, that's
But
why I'm not clear on this. Canada Post has turned a profit 19 out of the last 20 years. So I'm not really sure why Canada Post feels that the government, and by government I mean taxpayers, should be on the hook for whatever their weird agreement is with their union employees, and why we're not farming this out to another vendor that can provide the same service at a better rate. We have other, we'll call them postal delivery services, although that's not really what they think of themselves as, in like Canpar, FedEx, UPS, Purolator, DHL. Like there's lots of companies that will deliver mail-like objects.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why we need to have a crown corporation administered by our federal government that has their management appointed by our federal government that is beholden to apparently no one, because no matter what you do, these people want more money from the government. These people being the union. They want more government money, which is to say taxpayer money, to fund themselves so that they can have guaranteed pensions when they retire. No one in the private sector has guaranteed pensions when they retire, or at least no examples that I'm aware of, because everyone else is on the defined contribution plan. You pay in a specific amount, and you hope that your person that manages your investment portfolio is good at their job, and that you have money when you retire. At least that's how it works in my organization.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in that. Okay, if Canada Post is turning a profit, how much of that is due in part to their de facto monopoly on performing certain services? But yes, okay, so we have UPS, DHL, Canpar, Purolator, etc., and they primarily will provide parcel courier services, but they also do like the registered mail thing, overnight priority mail thing. That's kind of probably the primary market for like letter mail. What is the cost? There's a reason why UPS doesn't service, Iqaluit. Maybe they do, but it probably costs an absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why they don't do it. It's because it's not profitable, because it's not economically viable, because they can't compete with Canada Post that provides services at a subsidized rate. So everybody else in the rest of Canada has to, kind of pay so much. Like how much is a stamp these days? Like 69 cents, 70 cents.
Yeah,
Some of that cost is paying for other people elsewhere in the country, like in Yellowknife or Whitehorse, to also pay the same rate. Like the real market rate for providing mail services in those areas is probably like $1.50, $2 per letter, but the rest of Canada is paying into that so that everybody pays the same rate. And I think that's part of their charter, like as a crown corporation, is that the postal rate is the postal rate and everybody pays the postal rate.
Equalization of service.
Yeah. So how can a private enterprise compete with that? So that's why they don't bother.
I think they can't compete. They can't compete for one, and two, I don't think there's enough of there's not enough demand in those type of areas to ever justify a business out there.
Well, exactly, and that's what I was going to say. Is like obviously everybody has a price, right? So maybe the importation of certain goods to a isolated area isn't popular, but for the right price, they'll throw one on a plane for you and send it there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And yes, of course, like these are, while the GDP per capita is very high, it's generally concentrated into kind of tight holdings for people that have like profitable petroleum exploitation enterprises and diamond mining, et cetera, et cetera. It's generally not evenly distributed. But yeah, so you're stuck as a Canadian living in the southern part of the country, the densely populated parts of the country. You're stuck subsidizing activities that aren't necessarily economically viable or even economically necessary in other parts of the country. Like parcel delivery is one thing, but mail delivery, like how is that even still a thing? Like internet access has been like relatively affordable in this country for decades. I would hazard to guess that the amount of public sector investment that goes into servicing, in particular, northern Canadian communities, could probably be done more affordably if we just bought them a computer and a satellite internet connection, and then they can pay their bills online. Like, other than parcel delivery, do you really need mail anymore?
I think there are still people that would prefer to use mail for certain things to
Well,
actually
sure,
have
but
a
not at my
physical...
expense.
Absolutely, and that's the part that I have a problem with it, is I shouldn't be subsidizing someone else's services.
Preference. I mean, I would love to take a dump on a solid gold toilet, but no one else is going to buy it for me.
Yeah. So I mean, letter mail is definitely drastically decreased in Canada Post. I mean, that's been some of their issues. That's where they were looking at sort of dropped revenues for a while there before sort of the internet shopping and internet packaging kind of took over that business model for them and kind of saved Canada Post there. But I think that is very, very quickly that's becoming less and less of their business.
And some of the articles in our show notes here reference that the fear-mongering, the scaremongering of the strike, the pending lockout, etc., prompted people to choose alternate methods to ship, because they don't want to upset their customers by having their parcels kind of like in limbo for God knows how long. This pistol, we talked about this last week, the pistol that I won at the charity shoot, Thomas Donnelly from New Shooter Canada, he shipped it UPS because he didn't want it to he wanted me to get screwed and have this thing sitting in the Canada Post warehouse for 3 weeks. So thank you, Thomas. And I just ordered something from DS Tactical last week, and they shipped it FedEx. Every other package I've ever had from them comes Canada Post. Why do you chose FedEx?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of carriers, or I shouldn't say carriers, I've seen a lot of businesses choosing alternate carriers to Canada Post in the recent week or so. Mm-hmm. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that everybody is sending out notices that if Canada Post goes on a lockout or a strike, because a lot of people seem to be using them interchangeably and don't understand the difference, your bills are still due. Surprise, surprise. Like, I don't understand why we need to tell adults that, but okay.
And who's still mailing checks? I mean...
Yeah, it's the current year. Use the internet.
It's the current year. Who's still mailing checks?
It's the current year.
I've never had a checkbook in my life. It's just like, how is that still a thing?
That surprises me because you and I are about the same age, and I have had to have a check because I've dealt with landlords that would not accept anything but.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I have a checkbook because when I went to school and I rented a house in school, I had to give checks.
That's right. There's occasionally some old school individual that will only accept a check because apparently that is the only type of currency they can handle.
I guess I will reveal my privilege here in that when I went to school, my father bought the house and I paid rent directly to him in cash, so I didn't have to write a check to anybody.
Yeah, and I think the reason for them wanting checks is that they only have to see you once.
Yes.
Like they hand over the keys, you hand them a stack of post-dated checks.
Yeah.
They never see you again until you move out.
Yeah. And I have learned from that, and they no longer get post-dated checks because when I demand that my things be fixed in my rental unit, I demand that they be fixed.
There you go.
And then we can trade for the checks. But anyway.
Yeah.
Have we got anything else to say about the Canada Post strike, or this is hopefully a non-issue now that the union and management are back in talks about what they're going to do?
Maybe I'll ask the question, guys. Canada Post, do you think it's an essential service or not? And if it is or is not, then like how do these private alternatives kind of fit into the equation?
It's probably not an essential service because there is private industries that replace it. That being said, given the option, I choose Canada Post every time. And basically, it's just for quality of service and convenience for me. So where I am, and actually even when I lived in Waterloo, with UPS or Purolator and that, if it's a missed delivery, they take it back to their sort of distribution center, and it's like an hour drive away. Whereas in Canada Post, there's always sort of a Canada Post depot within 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of a convenience thing for me, and typically their prices are cheaper. So I shoot Canada Post not because it's of any other reason than it's sort of it's a better service for me.
Yeah, if anyone else could compete on the price point, because generally the couriers are slightly more expensive, but I find generally the couriers also have a better delivery time and better tracking than Canada Post. So I'm not sure that trade-off is always necessarily worth it, but if a private courier, like say Canada Post was eliminated from the picture, if a UPS or a Purolator could provide the same function at a marginal increase in cost and continue to deliver the overnight, next day, 2-day kind of service that I'm used to with a courier, and the level of tracking visibility that I'm used to with a courier at a price slightly higher than what Canada Post does now because Canada Post just ceases to exist, I would be perfectly okay with that because I don't understand why I should be subsidizing someone else's whatever it is they're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. Like parcel post or mail post or some other thing altogether. If you choose to live in an area where it's expensive to receive a service, there's no one forcing you to continue to live in that area. Move where services are more affordable.
Yeah, or failing that, there will be businesses that come up where they receive your goods kind of in a populated area where it's reasonably economically feasible to kind of have things shipped, and people just go and pick them up every 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Just drive in and then I have a box here. I would like to pick up all my parcels, please. That type of thing.
And right now, UPS and Purolator, they're less convenient for sort of home delivery stuff, but I think they really can't compete with Canada Post in that market space. As soon as that opens up, then it becomes a lot more competitive for them to try and get that business.
Yeah, like all the major carriers deliver to where I am. I'm in Thornbury, and despite there being like UPS stores and whatnot in Collingwood is actually in a different county than Thornbury. So the base I'm assuming for some sort of regulatory purpose, the base for UPS, the base for Purolator, the base for CanPar, all of them is in Owen Sound, which is much farther away than Collingwood. So whenever I follow the tracking for my packages, they all originate in Owen Sound, and then when I miss them, that's where they go. But I will tell you that CanPar, despite what you would expect, CanPar actually has the best shipping rates to my home. It beats Canada Post. It's like $2-3 cheaper than Canada Post, and Canada Post is the next closest competitor, believe it or not. So for CanPar, for whatever reason, they've got the route down. They've got it like super efficient. I couldn't explain it to you. And to also kind of add to what Andrew was saying, I actually find Canada Post to have the most reliable and detailed tracking. in my experience. Kind of strange the way that works. But the tracking's the tracking, and I have had issues with Canada Post, and I have had issues with other carriers with their tracking. So it's kind of like it's still not something that anybody has really made perfect yet. But
Well, no, and until we can eliminate people from the equation, it won't be, because
yeah,
all of those tracking scans, for the most part, is still somebody doing the actual scanning.
mm-hmm.
Whether it's somebody loading it into the truck or whether it's somebody loading it into a pallet off of a shipping dock or what have you,
Yeah.
most of those are still not like conveyor belt fed laser barcode readers that are infallible.
Sure, and I have had issues actually. I got a package. This is the best one. I ordered a cleaning mat and the Allen Gator Tri-Mags for Ruger 1022 magazines from Ruger in the United States. And the tracking showed it went from Connecticut to Arizona to Los Angeles to Tokyo to Vancouver to Toronto to me. And I'm sure that tracking is accurate, but I have a hard time believing that was the most economically reasonable way for the parcel to get to me.
That is probably not the most economically reasonable, but I can give you a good idea why that would happen. There's one of two things. Someone loaded it on the wrong pallet and it accidentally got on a plane to Japan.
That's what I'm thinking.
Or somebody accidentally loaded the pallet on the plane to Japan.
Yeah, because Connecticut to Toronto is not very far. It's like a 6-hour drive. It's not far.
Yeah, no, that sounds a lot like that was missorted. And 9 times out of 10, that is likely to be somebody in a sort facility somewhere that put it in the wrong pile.
And it's funny, and I've had that happen with Canada Post, just regular parcels. I've had things show up tracking in Toronto, and they're just coming to me in Thornbury, and then they get scanned in Winnipeg, and I'm like, well, what's going on here? That type of thing. But it happens. But as far as mail services go, the only important things I get in the mail, the actual, it's registration certificates for guns. And they could easily be emailed to me. You just don't need it.
Yeah, I can't think of a single example of something that I get in the mail that I really truly need as a letter. Like I get my 407 bill once in a while for using the paid-for public highway, and I get my registration certificates for guns. Occasionally I get a letter from the CRA, but that 9 times out of 10 that comes by email anyway.
Yeah. But, hey, it is what it is, and I'm sure things will evolve, and it will either survive or die. I know, despite what I have said on government, and despite what everybody else on the panel said about government in the past, they can only tolerate so much failure, and things do eventually die. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Let's transition into the next thing. Did you guys have a chance to watch the terrible video about the Toronto teacher that called? I totally messed that up.
Are you skipping topics?
No, we're not skipping topics. Scroll down to where it says news. Toronto teacher calls a terrorist who killed 4-year-old Israeli girl.
Scroll up to the article before that.
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
All right. So then, yes, we're skipping topics.
I put it in there in case we needed filler. We're 90 minutes in. We don't need filler.
All right.
What was I saying?
We're talking about the person who called the terrorist a hero. A typical look. I mean, the Israeli-Palestinian situation. I'm not Jewish and I'm not Arab. I really have no skin in the game, but I think what she had to say is retarded.
My concern is not. I have no problem with what she says. My concern is that she is an educator of children. My concern is what she would say in front of impressionable young people.
Yeah, and she's
like
not
her
alone.
opinions.
That's like the mainstream opinion these days.
Yeah, and I mean, her opinion is her opinion, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we do a show every week where a lot of people don't like our opinion. I'm fine with that. My problem is that she's in a position where she can influence the education and the mindset of dozens of young people every year. And I don't feel that they're getting the balanced, both sides of the story. like, just based on the way that she presents herself in this video at this rally, I don't feel like she's able to separate out her personal belief from, like, both sides of what's going on in that, like, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Not even going to get into the details of that conflict, because really that's like a whole episode topic and probably going to piss off a lot of people, but whatever. It's just, kind of my sentiments are just kind of with you. It's just that this is what I expect of the state. If it's going to exist and it's going to do its thing, it should be faceless and without opinion. It should be objective. And when somebody is in a position of teaching and has obviously these very polarized opinions, then it is damaging to the students. That quite frankly, that's kind of the end of it for me.
Marty, do you have any thoughts?
Not really. I mean, yeah, it sucks that she's a teacher. I don't think I would go much more beyond that unless I heard that she was actually talking about this kind of stuff with students. And the fact that she is sort of an ESL teacher in an elementary school, I would hope that this type of conversation isn't coming up in her teaching duties.
Yeah, I would hope not, but I mean, this is one more, I don't know, one more nail in the coffin in my mind for the whole public education system, because it should be like a faceless, like you're going to go and you're going to get training, and the person delivering the training shouldn't have their own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And after listening to 9 minutes of video of this woman speaking, I have a really hard time believing that she can separate her personal opinion from her professional, like, method of conducting herself.
Yeah, it bleeds into her narrative in the classroom, like left, right, and center. You know it. I mean, if I taught a class, I would be like the Ron Swanson of teaching. Like, there would be nothing I could say that wasn't anti-government, because that's my personal perspective, and it would, even unconsciously, it would just kind of infect everything I had to say. It's just like, what do you think, like, when you guys were kids, when you went to class, like, did your teacher ever ask you, like, what you did on the weekends? Like,
sure.
mine would, they would just tell you, hey, what did everybody get up to this weekend? And what do you think she's going to say? Oh, I stood for, whatever, and I slammed,
went to a pro-Palestinian rally in Toronto where I acknowledged the ability of people to kill tiny Israelis.
Yeah, like, and it's not like the state of Israel doesn't have blood on its hands, but that doesn't mean you kill kids. I mean, come on, what the hell?
Yeah.
Well, it was his own kid that he killed too, wasn't it?
No, the particular case that's being referenced, it was a Palestinian that had broken into the home of an Israeli and killed their daughter.
Yeah. It's just disgusting.
It was supposed to have been retribution for another Palestinian, a pregnant Palestinian, having been killed at the hands of the Israelis.
Yeah, okay. I read the article wrong when I skimmed it.
Yeah. More violence begetting more violence.
Yeah.
It's a good one to come back to, I think, because we could probably, talk about it really in depth for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's I don't want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about a different rabbit hole. Trudeau promises to decriminalize anal sex for 16-year-olds. No, nobody's taking the rabbit hole joke on that?
I guess it's a dick hole these days, but I tend to agree with your wife, Andrew, on this, in that it's kind of like, all right, maybe there are health issues that we should kind of be interested in talking about, but really, like, you think that people, like, okay, I'm not going to ask you about your personal lives, but I'm willing to guess that either the two of you or people it was pretty common for people to have lost their virginity by the time they were 16, 17. People are having sex by the time they're 15, 16, 17. Yeah. And people who are homosexuals are probably butt-fucking each other by the time they're 15, 16, 17. I'm sorry, Andrew, the editing.
The editing.
But it's just something that they do, and it's obviously not my thing, but if it's going to be consensual, whatever, and it's just,
So yeah,
kind of
I
saying,
mean,
oh, okay, we're gonna move forward. If the age of consent in Canada for vaginal sex is 16, then we're gonna move forward and make the age of consent for anal sex 16 as well. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. It's kind of funny that the age of consent used to be 14 in this country.
so here's my thing: the age of consent is the age of consent, regardless of which body parts you're sticking in somebody else's body parts. If you're old enough to make an informed decision to do that, you're old enough to make an informed decision to do that. And it shouldn't matter which body parts are going in which body parts.
Exactly.
I mean, to be fair, my wife did make a good point at dinner the other day about, like, young adults not understanding all of the necessarily health implications of putting genitalia inside anuses. But
Sure.
young adults are pretty fucking stupid. I think we can generally agree on that. I was a young adult. I was pretty fucking stupid. A lot of editing, whatever.
Oh yeah, a lot of raw dogging, you know.
A lot of editing.
Yeah. But
So-
same thing. I agree with Tyler. As long as it's consensual, who cares? If it's non-consensual, there's other laws that already protect against that.
Let
So
them be happy.
this is-
Let them be happy.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I don't really care who's doing what to whom with what, as long as it's consensual. And if we're gonna make the age of consent 16, then we make it 16.
I
We're gonna
think
make
by
it 18.
by age 16, I think you're pretty well set in life to make informed decisions. I mean, I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of the Youth Criminal Justice Act. People who are 15, 14, 13 even are very well aware of their actions and the consequences of their actions. People are are readily capable of making informed decisions, and I just don't really see the problem. I mean, I was having sex before I was 16, and I didn't get AIDS because I wasn't a dumbass.
Okay, so here's my issue with this: is the average young person is an idiot. The average 20-year-old of any variety of 20-year-old is still an idiot because we have this never-ending culture of. Well, we talked about this before on the show. We've touched on it, that there's this never-ending, like, college life, like, disenfranchised young adult, and people are not responsible for their own actions anymore. And we've talked about this without going into it at length. I don't think the age of consent should be that young because these people are not willing to take responsibility for their actions. But yes, you're right, Tyler, that they should be able to make an informed decision at that point. My problem is that they don't.
Look, as the article says, there's already case law that invalidates this law, and so him bringing this down to the age of 16, it's a change that's doing absolutely nothing. It doesn't affect anything in the legal system.
Yeah.
He's able to placate his voter base without actually doing anything. It's just a win-win for him.
That's a very good point.
That's
something
exactly
that,
what it is.
Yeah, it's not. What is not talked about is that exactly the case law. And I think what was the one kid, was he 14 even?
I don't know.
I think he was younger than 16, and then he had homosexual sex with some guy from the U.S. But he went into court after they got caught, and he went into court and insisted that it was consensual and it was like all good. And then the judge basically just said, "What can I do? They say it was consensual." So that's just it, right?
14.
Yeah, I'm fine with that if it's consensual. I'm fine with whatever it is, as long as it's consensual, regardless of the age, within some limits. As long as you're old enough to understand what that is. The problem is you can't set a hard and fast limit on what that is. Because there are a lot of very mature 14-year-olds, and there's a lot of very immature 24-year-olds.
For sure, and that's the thing. And it's just like, well, how do you determine who's mature enough, and then who has the authority to make that determination of who is mature enough or not? That's kind of the issue to grapple with.
Yeah.
At 16 years old, we're putting people behind the wheel of a car and sending them on their way. So,
I mean, that's kind of my mentality on it. Is if you deem somebody fit to do that, then they're fit to make decisions about their own body.
I agree with you up to a point. There was a point in my life where I was deemed fit enough that I could go and die for my country, but I still wasn't allowed to buy beer in most of the provinces.
Yeah, and
actually, I take that back. There was actually a point where I couldn't buy beer in any of the provinces.
yeah, but don't use a bad law to justify other bad laws.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like,
You just
the age at which we say people are able to make decisions is seemingly arbitrary based on what that decision is.
Well, I agree, and I think
Yeah.
most of the other limits are arbitrarily set later in life, like too late in life.
I agree. But we should probably do a whole show on the whole, like, never-ending disenfranchised youth phase,
Yeah.
since that now extends well into their 20s.
Oh yeah, big time.
I guess, full disclaimer, I'm still in my 20s. I wish I was still disenfranchised youth.
Yeah, I turned 28 last month.
Sucks, eh?
Yeah.
I'm 31 and I'm still in my disenfranchised youth.
Alright, should we talk about stupid people with ammunition around campfires?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, that's how I would define this one.
Alright. In Manitoba, a man was injured after bullets were thrown into a Canada Day bonfire. The RCMP says alcohol may have been a factor. Fucking shocker.
I think it said it was a factor.
Oh, they expressly say that it was a factor?
Alcohol.
That's amazing. Okay, so I have a couple issues with this, because they expressly say in the article that they threw 22 caliber shells into the fire. And then they also say that a man was hit in the eye with bullet fragments. So, if you go on the YouTube, and I'm not putting a link to this in the show notes, but if you go on YouTube and Google throw ammunition into a fire, see for yourself what happens if you haven't experienced that. If you haven't experienced that, apparently you haven't lived in the right parts of Canada yet, because I'm pretty sure that's something we all do by the time we're 20. Maybe not if you live in Toronto.
What I used to do is I would pull the projectile out of a 22 long rifle case, and then I would dump the powder out in a line, and then
Nice.
light the powder on, and then the fire would travel up the powder line to the casing, and then it would get into the casing and light the primer, and then the casing would like fire across the room. That's what I would do. Don't try it at home.
Like I said, I'm not putting directions in the show notes. But I have a very hard time believing that anyone was hit in the eye with a bullet. Because if a case ruptures from being in a fire because the powder cooked off, or the primer cooked off for that matter, the bullet is the really heavy part. It's very unlikely that it's going anywhere.
So,
Yeah.
are you just like arguing about the nomenclature? The fact that they called it a bullet fragment?
I'm saying that the CBC is making this sound way more dangerous than it really is.
I mean, I believe that a fragment of something hit him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it did, but I'm also very confident that it was not a fragment of the bullet.
No, the bullet did not fragment at all.
Right? Like what's a 22 caliber bullet? Say 40 grains on average.
Yeah, 36 to 40 grains. That's it.
Yeah, the whole 22 LR shell, like the entire cartridge, weighs maybe 65, 70 grains.
In all, yeah, total, yeah.
Yeah, total. Like half of the weight is the bullet. The bullet is a big solid piece of lead in comparison to the rest of it.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that this guy was hit in the eye with like an ember or some debris that was in the fire, or maybe the actual case itself. I don't think it was the bullet. But
Yeah, very possible. And we are
thumbs-
assuming that it's a 22 like rimfire.
No, no.
And-
Well, okay, we're assuming it's a 22 rimfire, but it does say in the article that it's a 22 caliber shell.
Yeah, and that was one thing I was going to point out, in that if it was like a 22 centerfire, they would have referred to it as like a high power assault rifle round.
Love that.
So it's
yeah,
definitely rimfire.
Mostly, I think we're just making fun of the CBC at this point, and also public service announcement: don't throw ammunition into bonfires. It's not the best life decision you can make.
You can do it, just wear eye protection.
The same thing applies to our last story. Anyway.
And a condom.
And a condom.
That's right. Do whatever you want, as long as you're old enough to understand the consequences, and one of those should be wearing adequate protection.
Yeah. I mean,
All
like
right.
I was wearing body armor at the rifle course, and we had like 100, 120 guys, and of course we could only find like 2 or 3 brass casings.
That's horrible. I'm taking that out.
If anybody gets that reference, then we'll give you something free.
Yeah, we don't know what that is yet, but we'll figure it out. Actually, which is, I guess, a good segue for things that are not free. We've got rapid fire feedback. We're going to start with email. We've got an email from Howard. He says, "Your new logo rocks. Are you going to print up some T-shirts? Want one?" Yes, Howard, that is in the cards. I have to figure out how to go about doing that precisely, but that is the idea. We've also got an email feedback from a listener, Jordan. Jordan says, "Hey guys, I was on my way to work this morning listening to Kingston's Ontario K-Rock 105.7 when the two morning show hosts started bashing guns, saying how they were scary, and, quote, I can believe people have them in their homes. They are so dangerous. They were spouting off a bunch of false information about how assault rifle and AR-15 assault rifles. I'm a huge supporter of your show, as well as the International Liberty or Death podcast. Tyler, if you could or want to bring this up on your podcast too, that would be great. I couldn't find a spot to send you the message I sent to the radio station. Bunch of beta male cucks."
Nice.
Here was my message to the radio station. "Hello, I am, air quotes, outraged at the way Chris and Tony discussed how bad guns are this morning. I don't disagree bad people are using them for bad things, but when people go on rants as they did this morning, it paints bad pictures in people's minds that are on the fence or already don't like guns against us responsible, law-abiding citizens."
All capitalized.
Yeah, lots of capitals. Lots of capitals. To go on, how they know you can just walk into a range in America and pick up automatic rifles is completely false. You are not allowed to own or use fully automatic weapons, even in the States. On top of that, we have target ranges here in Canada with guns you can walk in and use. Do they even know what an assault rifle is? I believe they referred to the AR-15 as an assault rifle. Do they even know what AR stands for? Armalite rifles, it's a brand. Only the military has assault rifles. They went on to say how it would be so scary to have them in your home. Wow, I must live on the edge because I've grown up with them in every house I've lived in, and never once have they harmed anybody or anything. I'm not trying to be rude, but they shouldn't be spouting off random incorrect facts about the subject if they're not going to educate themselves on it first. Just last weekend in Brockville, there was the 6th annual charity shoot. The funds raised go to a local charity. This year, the money raised went to Soldier On. The community that came together to donate their time, money, gifts, props, and land was great. There was even some Americans that came up, one from being from Texas. A few people from New Brunswick even made it out. Without guns, this would never have happened for the last 6 years, and the charity wouldn't have received the money raised by these people. Also, our country was built around trapping and hunting. Guns are part of our heritage, and I'm very proud of that. They never slandered alcohol in this show. How many people turn violent after a few drinks and harm people? They never say that's scary. In fact, having alcohol in your house makes you a target for break and enter. Should we ban cars because people kill each other and bust loads of children, all caps, every year? Not anyone can get a firearms license. Anyone can get a driver's license. Most crimes committed with firearm is not done by a law-abiding citizen. It's done by a person with no license and an illegally obtained firearm. But I guess banning heroin and cocaine has made that a non-existent and unobtainable to harm people, hasn't it? Shit, my show notes did something weird.
Bad people will always find ways to harm people. If it's not a gun, it will be pressure cookers and nails, such as the incident in Boston, etc. Bad people are bad people. I'm a pretty loyal listener and promote your radio station to all, especially the Ryan Denny show, but I will not support your station or the comments made this morning, and they were very offside. Perhaps an apology to their valued listeners would be appropriate. Not for their views, everyone is allowed their view, but for spouting off inaccurate nonsense, fear-mongering information. Regards, Jordan. So, yeah, thanks. Hey, thanks for the support, Jordan. And obviously you're on side. You're not incorrect. You're right. These people on your local radio station suck. And here's the thing: is usually people don't hear, like kind of the inverse is like people don't hear when they do a good job, they only hear when they do a bad job. But when it comes to situations like this, they usually never hear when listeners are put off by their content. So, good on you for writing them and saying that you don't approve. A lot of people don't do that, so great.
Yeah. Yep, good for you for sending that in. My only word of advice would be to make this shorter and easier to read for them, because my show notes messed up. I can't imagine someone at the radio station going through this. My one suggestion would be to pick a point and focus on that, because you're giving them a lot of information, and I don't think they're going to be able to absorb it all.
Yeah, they're probably just going to dismiss you as a gun nut. I mean, that's been my experience, is that arguing with the leftist is, or maybe not a leftist isn't maybe the most accurate term, but a gun grabber in general. They're very dismissive people, and so you need to be very specific and precise with your language. You need to be very articulate. But at the same time, hey, you're one of the few that are willing to kind of write in and voice your opinion, so yeah. That's great.
Now, if you can find a friend, and they can find a friend, and they can find a friend, and all send that into the radio station.
And then you all get together and have a standard party.
No. Editing that out. We also have an iTunes review. This comes to us from Woodsman J. He says, "Epic content, finally realists, 5 stars. Hey guys, heard about you through listening to Slamfire. Great podcast. Love the topics and conversations you have. Listen to the most recent on the live YouTube. You have to stop editing out your podcast on iTunes. The unedited versions are way better. The topics you guys covered have...
Everybody says that.
Not everybody says that. Benny doesn't say that. Benny was in YouTube earlier. Benny says, hey guys, thought I'd say hi. I'll catch the rest when Andrew posts it.
All right, fair enough. I'm sorry, Benny.
Some people like the edited version of the podcast.
Benny's super cool, too. I love that guy.
Woodsman J, carrying on, says, the unedited versions are way better. The topics you guys cover have to be heard by more people. How else can we educate the dick-inverted morons in our country that go with the flavor of the week and can't think for themselves? Also, I think you need to copyright the phrase dick-inverted morons, because that's something we're going to use in the future.
It'd be a great name for a terrible shooting team.
Keep up the wicked podcast, guys. Also, just started listening to Liberty or Death podcast and would highly recommend that if you like Canadian Patriot podcast. Also, seeing it's a 5-star review, drink what I will be, Seagram's VO Rye mixed with Pepsi and or Shock Top Belgian White Brew. Cheers for now. So, point of clarification, I think everybody on the panel is a Coke household, not Pepsi.
Yeah, my girlfriend works for Coca-Cola, and she's a good shot. She would literally murder everybody who knows me that drinks Pepsi. So, yeah, and I own an excavator, so we can get away with it.
Pretty much Coke household, and I would strongly discourage mixing Seagram's Rye, Pepsi, and or Shock Top. The Shock Tops should be separate from the Seagrams and Cola, in my mind.
Shock Top's actually like a decent beer, just kind of on its own. I mean, I'm really partial to wheat beers.
Don't put rye in it, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm really partial to wheat beers, and it's actually like a decent beer. Despite its like kind of, I'm going to say, not very manly logo. Put it that way.
That's fair. So, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do that at facebook.com/CanadianPatriotPodcast or by visiting CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback. Remember, I love your hate mail. You can send that to me directly at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Make sure to include details about how you have been triggered. Nobody put their links in the show note. Tyler, where's the best place for people to stay in touch with you?
All my links are there.
Yeah, no, I didn't scroll that far in the show notes. Best way to stay in touch with me or to follow me is by subscribing to my podcast, Liber Death Podcast, on all the iTunes, Stitcher, or The Sketcher, everywhere fine podcasts are sold. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Liberty Podcast, or you can follow me on Facebook, Tyler Gerard. Generally, we all hang out all of our stuff is kind of interconnected. Gavin, Andrew, myself, and Jeff, and maybe even Marty, because this will be pretty close to home. We'll all be shooting at the Oxford Gun Club next month at the 4th match of the Ontario Action Shooting League's shotgun thing that got going this year. So if you are in touch with any one of us, you'll be able to kind of follow what we're getting into in the next couple weeks.
Right on. Marty, do you have a social media presence yet?
I do not.
No. At least you're consistent.
Yeah.
As always, my name is Andrew. You can find all my work on everydaytactical.com or on Twitter and Instagram at edtactical. For training opportunities with me, you can check out ragnaroktactical.ca. If you want to stay in touch with the podcast, that's CanadianPatriotPodcast.com or on Facebook at Facebook.com/CanadianPatriotPodcast. And as always, we'd like to remind our listeners that you are the true North, strong and free.